Hello, this is Rich Brown. I'm glad to welcome you to this learning module on how to take full advantage of your SBIRT Institute calculators. You'll find these calculators on an Excel spreadsheet in the SBIRT Institute's online file repository. Please download the Excel file onto your own computer. On this spreadsheet, you'll find 5 worksheets, which you can get to by clicking the tabs toward the bottom left corner of your spreadsheet. The first and second worksheets can help you as you plan to implement a new SBIRT program or improve your current program. The first worksheet, titled Staffing Needs, allows you to calculate how many hours your staff would need to deliver robust evidence-based interventions, including follow-up sessions. The second worksheet, titled Hospital Savings, allows you to estimate how much money your local hospitals could save from your site's SBIRT program, and perhaps the prospect of those savings would prompt them to offer some funding for your program. The remaining 3 worksheets have titles that start with QI. These worksheets can help you conduct quality improvement during the implementation phase of your program. What I'll do for the rest of this presentation is give you a brief orientation on using each of the worksheets. First, let's take a look at the Staffing Need worksheet. This worksheet will help you estimate the amount of staff time you'll need to deliver robust evidence-based interventions and follow-up to your patients. First, please notice the warning in bold at the bottom of the text box at around row 9. Only enter data in the cells that are highlighted in yellow. If you enter data in the other cells, you will disrupt the formulas that will give you the answers you're seeking. Now let's look at this worksheet row by row. For row 14, you'll need to know how many unduplicated patients your site serves in a year. By unduplicated patients, I mean the total number of patients you expect to see in the next 12 months, regardless of how many visits patients will make. You must enter a whole number between 0 and 100,000, or you'll get an error message. For demonstration purposes, I'm entering 3,000. For row 16, you'll need to know or estimate the prevalence of the conditions you'll be screening for. If you've already been conducting screening, you'll know what these prevalence rates are. If not, consider conducting screening for several days. Or if that's not possible, you might obtain estimates on the prevalence of unhealthy drinking, drug use, cigarette smoking, and depression from your state's results in the latest National Household Survey on Drug Use and Health, which you can find at the URL highlighted in blue. If you primarily serve economically disadvantaged patients, bear in mind that the combined prevalence of unhealthy drinking and drug use is about the same as for the rest of the population. The lower rates of unhealthy drinking and the higher rates for drug use tend to balance out. For economically disadvantaged patients, you might add 5 to 10 percentage points for smoking and 15 to 25 points for anxiety and depression. When you enter prevalence data or positive screen rates, please convert percentages to decimals. So if the prevalence is 20%, enter 0.2. If you don't enter a decimal between 0 and 1, you'll get an error message like this. I'm going to enter 0.3 for alcohol and drugs, 0.2 for smoking, and 0.4 for anxiety and depression. If your program will only address alcohol and drugs, please enter 0 for the other behavioral conditions. Notice that row 18 now shows the total number of your patients who you can expect will screen positive over the next year. For row 20, enter the average number of initial and follow-up sessions you anticipate delivering for each patient who screens positive. Include face-to-face, phone, and telehealth contacts. You can enter a whole number or decimal between 0 and 20. Bear in mind that some patients will just have an initial intervention, only one session, while others might want lots of support to change. The key studies on the effectiveness of SBIRT offered 4 sessions per patient, so I'll put 4 for alcohol and drugs. Optimal services for smoking cessation require more than 8 intervention sessions, but many patients will not receive that number. So I'll enter 4 for smoking as well. For collaborative care for anxiety and depression, many patients require 10 sessions, but some patients don't receive that many. So I'll enter 6 for anxiety and depression. Notice now that row 22 shows you the number of sessions you would ideally deliver to all of your patients for each condition you're addressing. In row 24, you'll enter the average number of minutes for each session, a whole number or decimal between 5 and 60. I usually estimate 30 minutes per session. The initial session might be shorter or longer. Follow-up sessions are usually shorter, but it's a good idea to allow time for no-shows and failed attempts to reach patients. In row 26, you'll get the ultimate answer you were seeking: the number of hours per year you can anticipate spending to deliver interventions for each behavioral topic in columns B, C, and D, and across all topics in column E. Notice that to deliver an average of 4 30-minute intervention sessions to a population of patients with a 30% prevalence of unhealthy drinking and drug use, it would take about 1,800 hours a year, about the equivalent of 1 full-time staff member. To address smoking, anxiety, and depression as well, given the assumptions we made, you'd need 6,600 hours of intervention time, more than 3 full-time staff. Many people are surprised at the staff time needed to address patients' behavioral issues with robust evidence-based services. Don't be discouraged if you don't have such staffing just yet. For now, just identify the staff time you have available and work with that. But as you're doing that, maybe you can also figure out how you can acquire the resources you'd need to expand your staff and deliver the services your patients could benefit from. So that's how to use the staffing need calculator. The next calculator, the hospital savings calculator, helps you estimate how much money your local hospitals would save from your SBIRT program. With this information, perhaps you'll be able to convince hospitals to provide funding so you can have the staff you need to serve all your patients with robust evidence-based services. Again, please notice the warning in row 9, as for the staffing needs calculator, that you should enter data only into cells with yellow highlighting. In row 13, as for the staffing needs calculator, please enter the total number of unduplicated patients you serve in a year. We'll stick with 3,000 for demonstration purposes. In row 15, you'll see an important assumption that for every patient you screen, and if appropriate, deliver a robust intervention, you'll prevent 0.437 days, or nearly a half day of hospitalization over the next year. This assumption is based on the peer-reviewed published findings of Wisconsin's SAMHSA-funded SBIRT program, which I directed, and you see the reference noted right here on the spreadsheet. In row 17, you'll see the total number of hospital days that your program could prevent. The number in row 13 times the number in row 15. The remainder of the spreadsheet helps you estimate the savings that would accrue for up to 5 hospitals who serve your patients. In row 21, please type the names of the major hospitals that your patients go to. If there are less than 5, then leave those columns blank. I'll enter the name of 2 hospitals, St. Mary's and Memorial. In row 23, please enter the proportion of patients who go to each hospital using decimals between 0 and 1. The sum of these decimals appears in cell H23 and should add up to 1. If so, 1 is shown in green. If not, the sum is shown in red, as it is now. Let's say that 75% of your patients go to St. Mary's and 25% go to Memorial. If I make a mistake and enter 0.2 for Memorial, the total is less than 1 and cell H23 remains red. I'll correct my mistake and enter 0.25 for Memorial, and now cell H23 shows a nice green 1. Row 25 shows the number of inpatient days that SBIRT would prevent in each hospital if all patients are screened and, if appropriate, receive a robust intervention. Rows 27 through 33 calculate hospital savings separately for your patients who have Medicaid and your patients who have no insurance. For each hospital in row 27, enter a decimal for the proportion of your patients who have Medicaid. I'll enter 0.5 for each hospital. In row 28, enter the savings that each hospital would realize if a Medicaid reimbursed inpatient day were avoided. I've conservatively estimated $600 a day. Please consult with your hospitals for their actual savings. Row 29 shows the total savings we can expect for all Medicaid patients at each hospital. In rows 31 through 33, please do the same thing for your patients who have no insurance. I'll assume that 40% of your patients at each hospital have no insurance. And I'll conservatively estimate that hospitals would save $1,000 for each inpatient day avoided. Again, please consult with your hospitals for the actual figures. So now row 33 shows the savings for all uninsured patients at each hospital, and row 35 shows the estimated savings for each hospital. It's pretty clear that hospitals that serve your patients would be wise to consider investing in your SBIRT program. That's how the hospital savings worksheet works. Now we move on to the 3 worksheets for your SBIRT QI program. The QI data entry worksheet is where you can enter data for each patient who comes to your clinic while your SBIRT program is up and running. The QI data codebook worksheet gives details on each of the data fields in the QI data entry worksheet. The QI results worksheet is where you'll be able to see how your SBIRT program is performing on key quality metrics. Let's take a look first at the data entry worksheet. Across the top are the names of the data fields, variables, or information that you'll collect on each patient who comes to your site. For every patient visit, a row of data is entered. Columns A through F are for the patient's last name, first name, middle initial, clinic ID number, birth date, and the date of the patient's visit. In column G, indicate whether the patient was eligible for SBIRT screening. Eligibility is typically determined by age and whether the patient has already been screened in the past year. Eligibility is one of several yes/no variables in this spreadsheet, where yes is indicated by 1 and no is indicated by 0. If the patient is not eligible, no additional information is entered and you're done entering data for that patient. If the patient is eligible, you'll indicate in columns H through K which staff member gave the patient the screen using their initials, which staff member collected the completed screen, whether a screen was completed, and the result of the screen. Whether the screen was completed is a yes/no variable where 1 indicates yes and 0 indicates no. For the screen result, 1 indicates positive and 0 indicates negative. If the screen is negative, there is no more data to enter for this patient. For patients with a positive screen, data is entered into columns L through W. In columns L through O, you'll enter the staff member who gave the brief assessment, the staff member who collected it, whether it was completed, and the date. In column P, you'll enter the result: 0 for low-risk use, 1 for high-risk use, 2 for problem use, and 3 for likely dependence. In columns Q and R, you'll indicate whether the patient is alcohol and opioid dependent. 1 equals yes, 0 equals no. In columns S and T, you'll enter a whole number between 0 and 7, indicating the number of days in the past 7 days in which the patient engaged in unhealthy drinking and drug use. These are the baseline measurements of the key outcome measures for substance use. In columns U, V, and W, you'll enter the initials of the staff member who conducted the brief intervention or referral to treatment, whether a brief intervention was conducted, and whether a referral to treatment was made. As usual, 1 indicates yes and 0 indicates no. For patients who are alcohol dependent, you'll complete columns X and Z on whether patients received education on pharmacotherapy and whether they took at least 1 dose of medication. Same thing for opioid dependence in columns Y and AA. The remainder of each row is for entering data on follow-up visits. The worksheet can accommodate up to 9 follow-up visits for each patient. For each follow-up visit, you'll record who conducted the visit, whether it was completed, the date of the visit, and the 2 outcome measures: the number of unhealthy drinking days in the last 7 days, and the number of days of drug use in the last 7 days. So we've covered the QI data entry page. Now let's take a look at the QI data codebook page. This page is only for reference. There is no data entry for this page. This page just gives detailed information on each data field or variable in the data entry worksheet. In column A is the name of the field or variable from the data entry worksheet. Notice that the variables are separated into sections on patients, screens, brief assessments, pharmacotherapy, and follow-up sessions. Column B gives a description of the data for each variable. Column C tells you whether error checking is performed for each field. If yes, that means that the spreadsheet will reject improper data. For example, if you enter anything other than a 1 or 0 for a yes/no variable, you'll be asked to try again. And for outcome variables, days of unhealthy drinking or drug use in the past 7 days, you have to enter a whole number between 0 and 7 or you'll get an error message. Column D shows the allowable data for each field. Okay, now let's go on to the QI results page. On this page, you'll see the reward, the payoff, for entering all that data into the QI data entry worksheet. In the current spreadsheet, this page is not yet operational. The future version of the spreadsheet is under construction, so for now this page merely lists the results that you'll be able to see here when we release the next version. On this page, you'll be able to conduct analyses of your data and generate process metrics, outcome metrics, and other valuable data on your SBIRT program. The process metrics will indicate your program's performance on screening, brief assessment, brief intervention, referral to treatment, education on pharmacotherapy, initiation of pharmacotherapy, and receipt of follow-up visits. You'll also be able to track the proportion of your patients who screen positive and the proportion of patients who fall into various risk categories according to their brief assessments. Last but not least, you'll be able to determine the effectiveness of your program with analyses of changes in unhealthy drinking and drug use at 1 month and 3 months after baseline. For all of those analyses, you'll be able to specify the time unit and time frame. For example, you'll be able to analyze data by day, week, or month, and you'll be able to specify start and stop dates. For various steps in the SBIRT process, you'll also be able to analyze completion rates by staff member. So if some staff members are not performing as well as others, you'll be able to troubleshoot and improve performance. Yes, it will take significant staff time to enter data on each patient. I hope you'll agree that it would be well worth it. In my experience working with several dozen primary care sites to implement SBIRT, this is by far the best way to objectively assess and improve program performance, document program reach and effectiveness, and generate strong evidence to support program sustainability. Thanks for watching. As always, feel free to contact your SBIRT Institute faculty with any questions.